Welcome back to another edition of the Top Prospects Podcast. I'm Chris Lemmo alongside Logan Bourandas. And Logan, I know you've got something very special to show us here. I think that you announced the arrival during the last episode, so I guess you got to show it off now.
Yeah, I mean, I said I think during the last show I said it had arrived. I picked it up a couple hours ago, but the stand up is just showing you the Francisco Lindor jersey. It is a thing of beauty. He's not playing too great right now, but the Mets they haven't played a lot of games, but finally got a new jersey and hopefully one I can cherish for the next decade. But I'm having a good day, Chris. I mean, I'm looking forward to another episode just talking baseball.
Of course, it's been a fun week around the league. So I guess we got to start off, since we seem to be recording every Thursday now. With last Thursday was the first controversial call at the Mets. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this first. We probably agree on this, but for those who don't remember, it was I guess the game-winning hit by pitch by Michael Conforto there against the Marlins. So what are your thoughts on the call there?
First of all, I think they got it wrong. I think it was clear that Michael Conforto's elbow, he clearly leans into the pitch, I think. It was kind of like out of an instinct. I don't think he meant to do it intentionally, but that's just what ended up happening. And the Mets would end up winning with that hit by pitch there. And my initial reactions were I thought the Mets were going to win anyway, even without that hit by pitch. Conforto would have struck out there, but there still would have been bases loaded, still would have been 2 outs. The Mets had all the momentum at this point, and Pete Alonso would have been on deck. So it wasn't exactly the worst scenario for the Mets. And you're playing the Marlins as well. So really a lot was going the way of the Mets at this point. So I don't think that call was really too big of a deal. And it was a win that the Mets really needed because I think it was their first of the year. Maybe it was their second of the year. But the Mets, they've been okay so far, currently in first place in the division, but they've had a lot of cancellations. I think they've had more cancellations of games than they have wins so far in the year. But overall, I think that it was clear that Conforto kind of leaned into it. The Mets announcers obviously agreed. They kind of said it on the call as well, but they reviewed it. I don't even think it's a reviewable call in my mind, but it was clear as day that he kind of leaned into it.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with that. I mean, I honestly don't think that a lot would have changed. I mean, I think the Mets probably still end up winning that game either way. I mean, my issue is more with that it's not reviewable. I think although replay tends to get stuff wrong sometimes, I mean, I think that that's something that needs to be reviewable. Now, the problem is I guess the league could say, well, how do you determine whether or not he made an effort, I guess, to get out of the way. Now, I think that was clearly not an effort, but we've seen this before. I mean, Chase Utley was one of those guys for the Phillies who made a living off of that. I mean, a lot of players in the past have, made a living standing right on top of the plate, and I don't want to say leaning into pitches, but definitely not making an effort to get out of the way. So it's not anything new. I mean, I get the frustration on the part of the Marlins just because of the fact that, when you look at the replay, it was pretty obvious, but it's not something new. Had they replayed it, yeah, probably would have been overturned. I don't think it changes the result of the game either way, like you were saying. But, that's something that in the rule book, maybe going forward should be looked at. We'll have to see. But yeah, I mean, I think, that's one of those things where I don't think that actually changed the game too much, despite the fact that, I mean, technically it was the game-winning call, but as you said, the Mets had all the momentum there. And then going into, of course, the Phillies call now, I want to hear your thoughts on that one, because that's another one that I think the wording in the rule book should probably change on the way that those calls are made.
Yeah, I think overall that was one that ended up getting reviewed, and either way, the umpires kind of thought that Alec Bohm clearly touched the plate, which he didn't. I mean, I think it was clear as day to really everyone who was kind of watching it that the foot of Alec Bohm was a little bit short and it kind of like went over the plate. He didn't really touch it there, and it was at a crucial point in the game too. It was in the ninth inning as well, and that was against a Braves team that had won 4 straight games, and they were kind of making a run to get out of the cellar early on. So it was just a really unfortunate break there for the Atlanta Braves, and I mean all the fans agree. I think Philly fans are still saying like Bohm touched home, even though everyone knows that he clearly didn't touch home. But overall, it was a tough way to end that series, and it was really under the national spotlight too, because that was an ESPN game. They don't really get a lot of games to broadcast as well, so just an unfortunate way for that one to end. Because I'm not going to argue with the. I am going to argue with the call. I mean, he's clearly out, but overall, it just kind of shows a lot of flaws in that review system.
Yeah, I do agree. I think he was most likely out there. I think the problem is that, in the rule book, and this is the same way in the NFL, and why there's so many arguments over calls in the NFL, and it's the whole indisputable evidence thing, and what is indisputable evidence, the fact that it has to be 100% and stuff, and that leads to calls where you might have 80, 90, 99% thinking, okay, this is pretty clear. But then the problem is I guess technically 99% isn't indisputable, which I don't know how you change the wording on that. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of the problem, in my opinion, is the wording on it. I don't know how you change it to say that indisputable is not the way to go there. I think it should be not most likely call. I don't know how you'd really word it, to be honest. But I think that indisputable makes it hard to overturn calls. As soon as I saw the replay, I kind of thought, yeah, he's probably out. But at the same time, they probably won't overturn it, just because in these kind of situations, they tend to not overturn calls. And I think it would have been the same way if he was called out on the field. They definitely wouldn't have overturned that there. Like I said, you see this in a lot of NFL calls, and I think it probably comes down to more of the way that it's worded. The way that it's worded leads to it making it really tough to overturn. So, yeah, the call was, I think, almost definitely wrong. But I think that at the end of the day, I think that my bigger problem with it is that I think the way replays are overturned might need to be changed, and the wording in the rule book probably needs to be changed there as well.
Yeah, I mean it's the reviewing issues in some sports. It's a problem we see in all sports where the just like the overall officiating process when it comes down to a close play like that, it's kind of come under some scrutiny there. I mean, we've seen this problem, especially in sports such as football and basketball. And officiating issues, they're always going to be a problem. But I think what's concerning for baseball is that we've had two calls that really should have gone one way go the other way, and they ended up costing both teams the game. And they were both divisional battles as well. So it's just unfortunate that it's really happened that way, especially when the calls are that close in my mind. And even with the Mets call, like it's just hard to like that couldn't really get reviewed because there was certain rules on what can be reviewed and what can't be reviewed, and that's something that should be looked at down the road.
Yeah, I think the other thing here is that, not to say that people aren't, overreacting. I get, obviously, if that happened to the Phils, or if that happened against the Mets, I'm sure we'd both be pretty upset. But at the end of the day, the big difference here is baseball is 162 games, and football is, I guess, now a 17-game schedule. One game ending like that, I know the season can come down to one game. I get that. But in the grand scheme of things, it feels like every team kind of gets a few wins a year that they quote unquote steal. And this happens to be one of them. I mean, there's a lot of games that I think are decided by maybe not as controversial of calls, but by calls that could go either way every year. And I think this just happens to be magnified because it was in, the national spotlight, primetime ESPN game. And obviously the call was wrong. But that being said, like, I mean, I don't think that that's going to be the type of thing that comes down to ending a division. And quite honestly, even if the division does come down to one game, there's always other blown games by the bullpen that teams should have won to look back at besides what will end up being a blown call. So, yeah, unlike football where one game, at the end of the season, you can look back and say, wow, if we got that call, then we're in the playoffs. I I don't see it, over the course of 162. That's why, people always say, oh, baseball is way too long of a season. Well, baseball gets around, kind of weeds out all of the weird, I guess anomalies that you get over a few games. Like I saw some stat, it was like your mean Mercedes could hit, I guess he's hitting like, I don't know, like what, 450 right now. He could hit 250 the rest of the way. And the stat line would only be 258 because he's only had like 30 plate appearances. That's how insignificant, you know, a week or two of baseball really is in the grand scheme of things. So that's kind of, I think, something that goes overlooked. I mean, yes, the call was wrong, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to end up costing the Braves. I mean, look, maybe the Braves shouldn't have, nearly gotten swept in 4 games against the Marlins at home. You know, that'll be a series to look back at if they don't make the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the national spotlight in that Phillies game. I think that's why I was kind of glad it happened at that time because the Mets call happened a few days before, and that was all that some people were talking about. So the fact that the Phillies are starting to get a lot of attention for that call, I guess as a fan of the Mets, I felt kind of glad in a way that spotlight was off us. But yeah, I mean, it's still really early into the season, and there's going to be tons of divisional battles down the road, and every team blows saves. It's going to happen at some point. There's going to be at least one game in the next couple of weeks where a team will blow the game due to the bullpen, due to a player in a clutch situation not showing up. There is never a season where a team just doesn't blow saves in clutch situations. That just doesn't happen. So there's still a ton of time for those to happen and for teams to really look back at as this might be the reason why we missed the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing that was funny too is I saw a lot of people, a lot of hate directed towards Alec Boehm, and I'm like, what is he supposed to do? Like, be like, hey, I was out. Like, that's not how sports work. Like, I'm sorry, but like, it's not like on like a toe tapping play in the end zone, the guy's going to say to the official or his head coach, "Hey, you should go overturn that. I don't think I scored." Like, I'm sorry, but that kind of stuff only happens in Disney movies. This isn't a Disney movie. He's not going to say, "Hey, I was out." So, I thought it was weird that a lot of hate was directed there. Like the guys playing the game, and it's not like it was a dirty play. It was a play that the umpires should have gotten right that they didn't. I mean, there's nothing Alec Boehm could do about that. That's not his job. But I thought that was funny, and I also thought that I have to bring this up, but the ESPN, who I guess it was Matt Vasgersian, the dig, the throwing stuff on the field, and I'm like, oh god, come on. Like, first of all, I don't know that that's happened at a Phillies game. God, since I can remember. I mean, the last thing I can remember was probably at the Flyers game when they threw bracelets on the ice. This is probably at least 5 years ago, but I'm like, really? Like, that, I guess, I mean, even New York fans, I'm sure that's happened. It happens in a lot of sports cities, that fans, not that it's right to throw things on the field, but I don't know. It is funny that it always is, oh, look, Philadelphia, and it happens everywhere. But, I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, no, that definitely happens in New York arenas. I think that the first example that comes to my head is 2004 ALCS or the Yankees. Like Yankees fans starting to throw fans onto the starting to throw things onto the field in Game 7 against the Red Sox. But like that's just a big rivalry. That's playoffs. But no, it happens everywhere. Like, and it's not just a Philadelphia thing, not just a New York thing, but it happens really in every single sports league. A lot of different teams do it, and I mean, with New York, I mean, the Yankees have definitely done it, and I can't remember really a specific time where like the Islanders or Rangers have done it in hockey. Definitely not a time where the Long Island Ducks have done it in whatever league they're playing, and might be the Independence League at this point. But yeah, there's not really a lot of instances that comes to my mind, but it definitely has happened.
Yeah, I have to say, still my favorite is the "Oh, you guys threw snowballs at Santa Claus." I'm like, dude, that happened like 30 some years. Like cell phones weren't even invented when that happened. Like it I like okay, like we don't need to bring that up every single time. Like we get it. It's that's something that needs to be buried in the past. But anyway, skipping ahead here to some other storylines from the week, we had the Padres' first ever no hitter in franchise history, which was really cool. I mean, I kind of thought it was bound to happen at some point very soon, the way, this team stocked up on arms like crazy. So for Joe Musgrove to go out and do that, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's from the area out there. I could be wrong though, but I mean, how do you think for that, for that team, what do you think it means for that franchise to finally break that kind of a milestone?
Yeah, I guess when it first happened, I didn't really realize that this was their first no hitter in franchise history. And I mean, Musgrove, he's always been a reliable pitcher. He was always a really good player to watch when he played for Pittsburgh. He was kind of middle of that rotation there, but just because the Pirates were never that good, it kind of inflated his stats a little bit in terms of his ERA, just because the fielding isn't that good, the offense isn't that good, so the record's going to be worse. So he's kind of been made out to be like a worse pitcher than he actually is. But and I believe it was it his first start in San Diego? Maybe it was his second, but he was lights out in that game. Overall, just a dominant performance from Musgrove. Obviously, got the no hitter in that one. It was his second game, by the way. He got his second no his second start. He had 10 strikeouts as well. Went the distance, 112 pitches there. But I've always been a fan of Joe Musgrove. He's always been a reliable pitcher when he has played, and he kind of flew under the radar when he was traded over to San Diego because they also got Blake Snell and Yu Darvish, who were kind of higher profile pitchers. So, I mean, in terms of franchise standpoint, it's unbelievable just because like a lot of teams, I think every single team at this point has had a no hitter at some point. And I remember when the Mets got their no hitter earlier on in the 2010s, it was one of the best moments of franchise history just because it hadn't happened before. And now Padres fans have a moment to look at as this is the best pitching moment in franchise history. This is the best pitch game in franchise history. And the fact that it happened to a guy like Joe Musgrove, who's had a solid career, couldn't be happier.
Yeah, I mean, for the franchise, it's huge. I guess not only because it's the first in its history, but it kind of feels like, I mean, I guess obviously making the playoffs last year was kind of the first big, thing that you could say shows that they're moving forward now into this new era of Padres baseball. But this is really the first big milestone of what I think is going to be many to come for this Padres core and for the fans there. So I mean, it is huge. It is really big for them moving forward. And I mean, for Pittsburgh, I don't know how all 10 of those Pirates fans, or however many of them there are, can wake up every morning and look at themselves in the mirror. Like I do feel genuinely bad for them. I mean, to see guys like Garrett Cole and now Tyon with the Yankees, Musgrove with the Padres, and then of course who am I forgetting? God, I went back to Tampa this
Tyler
year.
Glass now, right? Or the no,
Oh,
Chris
Glass
Archer.
now, Archer, yeah. I think Glass now, yeah, Glass now is in Pittsburgh too. So I mean, it is incredible. I mean, honestly, if I'm the GM of any team, I'm just trading for whatever pitcher Pittsburgh has and just assuming he'll magically get good as soon as he crosses state lines or whatever. I mean, it's pretty amazing what these guys have done once they leave Pittsburgh. And if I'm Pittsburgh, I mean, they really need to take a good hard look at. I mean, I hate to say firing whoever, but I mean, they need to take a good hard look at how they evaluate talent there on the pitching side because it's not getting the job done. Period. It's pretty bad. But then we
Yeah,
do have. Oh no, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I guess what makes this worse is that all those players that you mentioned, Chris, like those all came from this past decade. So it's not like we're going through like a whole history of a team. We're going through this past decade. This is who the Pirates traded away. And just seeing Joe Musgrove pitch this good in just his second start with a brand new team, it must be heartbreaking. And obviously he came back to Pittsburgh recently to play the Pirates. They played a series very recently. Not sure how he did there, but overall, just a disappointing event for Pittsburgh fans.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty amazing. Although I do have to say they have had some guys offensively. Like I know who was it? It was Philip Evans was actually a Mets draft pick that's been like raking for them so far over at third base. They've had a couple of good stories. I mean, the team has honestly been more. I know they're 5-8, but they've still been more competitive than I expected this year. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing when you look at the guys that they've gone through, and not a single one of them have been able to break out well in Pittsburgh. So we'll see who the next victim is. But yeah, I mean, if you're a pitcher in Pittsburgh right now, I have to think that you want to get out as soon as your contract ends because I don't know if it's the pitching staff there. I don't know if it's the way they're developing them in the minors, but something is definitely up there in Pittsburgh. But we do have another no hitter to talk about, and it was nearly a perfect game, which, I can't remember the last perfect game. I'll have to look that up. But Carlos Rodon of the White Sox, it was kind of a surprise there, but he had nearly a perfect game there. How do you think that White Sox rotation is looking so far? Because I think they look like possibly one of the five best in baseball.
Yeah, I mean they've looked dominant. I mean they got Rondon early on. They also have Lance Lynn, who they brought in, and just adding that with guys like Lucas Giolito, Dallas Keuchel. Like this rotation is deep, and Rondon is probably the fourth best guy in that rotation thus far. And he pitched almost a perfect game. He had 7 strikeouts in that game. The only thing that prevented him from getting that perfect game was a hit batsman. Like just one hit by pitch is what prevents a no hitter from taking place. But overall, Rondon just mowing through this weak Cleveland Indians lineup. And we talked about the Indians before the season started, like not really a lot to get excited about in terms of offense there. I mean, Jose Ramirez and just a bunch of trash in that lineup. Really, overall, just taking a look at Cleveland, but what makes it sad for me is that I had Carlos Rondon on my fantasy team and I dropped him the day before he pitched that no hitter. Could have got me like 32 points for my fantasy team, but overall, that White Sox team looking really scary right now, and we know how young this lineup is. Looking at their offense, but their pitching staff could be what carries them really far in that rotate in the playoffs. There, I mean, right now they're currently 6-7. They're 1.5 games back, but look at how weak this division is with just being able to pick on teams like the Indians, Tigers, and Royals. The White Sox should be fine really soon.
Yeah, I mean, Rodon was a big surprise. I mean, obviously not that it was against Cleveland. Cleveland's lineup is really bad. But I mean, a guy coming back from Tommy John, he had Tommy John in 2019, and then in 2020 barely pitched. And in fact, only appeared in 4 games and had an over 8 ERA. But his stuff before that was good. When he was healthy before that, he actually had pretty good stuff. I think he kind of fell off the radar because Tommy John, it takes so long to come back from. I mean, you see a guy like Syndergaard, and I'm sure it'll be the same way when he comes back. I mean, people kind of forget because Tommy John takes away at least a year of your career, and then then you kind of spend after that year a year really rehabbing and getting back. I mean, it takes a long time for guys to recover, and it feels like Rodon might finally be back now. And that White Sox rotation is scary. I mean, I forget. I'd have to go back and look where I had them in terms of my best rotations in baseball. I hope I had them in my top five. I'm not sure though. But I mean, when you look at Giolito, Rodon, and Lance Lynn, that is really solid. And then you got Dallas Keuchel there. I mean, Dallas Keuchel's probably been their worst pitcher so far, and he hasn't even been that bad. But the Lance Lynn trade, I think, was a really good one. I mean, I know Lance Lynn is going to be 34 here shortly, so he's not young, and maybe doesn't fit with their timeline as much. But for right now, he's a good pitcher. And Dylan Cease is another young prospect stepping up. And then you got a guy in Michael Kopech who has looked really good to start the year. In his first 6 innings pitched, he hasn't allowed a run, over 15 strikeouts per nine and only 2 walks per nine. So a lot of their young pitching prospects have stepped up um, right now, and the lineup has not been as good as you would expect. I do think they'll turn the corner here. They still haven't gotten like Andrew Vaughn going. Luis Robert has been pretty quiet. Same with Grandal. Really, the guy that's carrying their lineup right now is Yermin Mercedes, and I mean, as impressive as that is, I don't know what your thoughts have been, but do you think that Mercedes can keep this going? I mean, because right now, I mean, he has been the main cog in that White Sox lineup.
I mean, hot starts have always been a thing in the MLB. I mean, two examples that I can really think of. Trevor Story had a really hot month back when he first started his career. And obviously, we know what kind of player Trevor Story's been. He's been one of the best shortstops in the MLB these past couple of years. But then there's also the Eric Thames story, where he had a really hot, I believe it was a hot April, and he was leading the league in home runs in the early going, and then he kind of fell off the face of the earth. Same thing kind of happened with Jesus Aguilar. Had a really hot start to a season, and he was the one seed in home run derby that year. And then ever since then, he's fallen off the face of the earth. He's starting first baseman for the Marlins right now. But overall, that there's really two ways that it can go. And Mercedes, he had a little bit of playing time in his rookie season in 2020. Obviously, this is still his rookie season, but he's 28 years old, so he's a really old rookie. And overall, I'm not sure how sustainable this performance is. I mean, we know that the White Sox are going to keep playing him for now, but it's rare to see a guy pop up from nowhere into becoming this massive star, especially when you're a late bloomer in terms of the MLB. So I don't think it'll be too sustainable for Mercedes. I can definitely see him being like a 250, 260 hitter for this season. I mean, he's hitting 476 right now. Like obviously, no one can sustain that throughout an entire season. So I think that we'll definitely see a slide off from Mercedes very soon.
Yeah, I actually have to say I think the easiest comp, and it might be a lazy comp, but is Mike Yastrzemski on the Giants, who was another late bloomer, spent a lot of time in the Orioles organization, which, by the way, I believe Yermin Mercedes did. I believe. I know he spent some time with the Nats, but kind of just floundered around until he was around, I believe, 28 years old. Yeah, that's actually Yastrzemski broke out at, yeah, 28 with the Giants in 2019. So, sometimes I guess this can happen. You get these guys that find something later in their career when they turn 26, 27, and really start to get the bats going. But, I think with both of those guys, Yastrzemski and definitely Mercedes, are both bat first guys that never really had the glove to fit anywhere else. I know Yastrzemski's playing corner outfield, but from what I've heard about Mercedes, I haven't seen him catch before, but he's not the greatest. So he'll definitely stay DHing, I think, even as people around him shift in that lineup. But the rest of that lineup right now has not gotten going, but I do think that they will. And quite honestly, that division has not started off that well. I mean, you look at the White Sox at 6-7, Twins at 6-7. Nobody's really that impressive. But switching gears to somebody who is impressive, and I got to say, he had a monster series, and that's Ronald Acuna. I mean, do you think Ronald Acuna is definitely right now? Would you say that he's, I don't want to say a lock for MVP because obviously it's week 2, but do you think he's a lock to finish in the top 3 in the MVP race?
I think so. And I mean, Acuna, he's always been a guy who's been in consideration for the MVP. He's always been a guy who could be in the top 10. And overall, just the way he started out this season, he's definitely going to be in the top 3. And I'll make that prediction now. I can definitely see Acuna finishing in the top 3 in MVP come season's end. I mean, he's currently third in the league in average, and I believe he's towards the top in home runs as well because he has 7 of those right now. And it's still really early on in the season. And he's been kind of that shining light to a Braves team that's had a really slow start to the season thus far. And he actually does lead in batting average, by the way. But I think my prediction at the start of the season was Juan Soto. And we haven't really seen a lot of the Nationals so far this season. So I definitely want to count out him, but I think Acuna right now, he is definitely the early favorite. And looking around the NL, no one's really shown out in the home run category aside from Acuna. I mean, Tyler Naquin and Ryan McMahon, they tie for second in the NL. They both have 5 home runs, but overall, I think we know that Acuna is definitely most likely to keep that performance up, and especially with guys like Fernando Tatis going down really early due to injury. Acuna is definitely the favorite for MVP right now, and I think he'll be in top three, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to have found an extra gear this year. And I know he was actually a popular pick for MVP before the season. And I stupidly was, saying, I don't get why. I mean, I think Soto is better, but I mean, Acuna is just, I mean, he had a monster series against the Phillies and then the Marlins. But, I think he'll probably finish top five or top three if I had to guess. I mean, I'm like you said, nobody else in the NL is really off to that hot of a start. I mean, Castellanos has had a good start. Believe it or not, Adam Duvall also has 4 homers. Adam Duvall quietly had a big series against the Braves, his former team there, and he's a guy that really has a good power stroke. I mean, I think he's kind of underrated, honestly. But I do want to get to some more of the team surprising teams so far. And, one of them I think that I counted out was the Marlins. I mean, I don't want to say I counted them out. It was, one series in, but last week on our overreactions, we were saying that, the Marlins, or I was saying that the Marlins don't look like they can hit at all and probably we're headed for the basement again. But they had a really impressive series against the Braves. Jazz Chisholm looks like the real deal. So, Logan, how good are you feeling about your prediction about the Marlins right now?
Well, Chris, I mean, I'm very happy that I had the Marlins in fourth. I mean, right now, they've shown against the division favorite in the Atlanta Braves that they, in fact, do have an offense. I mean, 5 runs in the first game, 14 runs in the second game, and 6 runs in the third game. Overall, this has been a strong Marlins team. And I said they have the pieces. I said they have the pieces to potentially make a run out of the basement. And right now they're not in the basement, which is fantastic. And I mentioned Jesus Aguilar leading the team in batting average thus far, hitting 333. They still have Starling Marte. He's hitting over 300 as well. They have some names, but what hurts them is they don't have any stars. But they have good players on both the pitching staff and the lineup that I can't really consider them to be a basement dweller right now. And overall, the Marlins are currently in third place right now in the NL East, 5-7 record, have a 0 run differential. They've looked really strong thus far. They could even been 6-6 had the Michael Conforto call gone their way. But overall, this Marlins team has been pretty impressive so far. Only been one series, only one series against the Braves, but definitely a good sign for the future.
Let's continue talking some NL East here because in my mind this has been the weirdest division so far in baseball. I mean, the Marlins, like you said, they don't have a big star, and I think that kind of hurts them. But I continuously underestimate that team, and I think it's because that they got a lot of solid veterans that aren't stars but are consistently day in and day out really solid players. I mean, Adam Duvall looks really good. I mean, I think the Braves right now, with the way things have shaken out, I mean, they're starting Guillermo Heredia in center field right now with Kristen Pache going down. And with Pache going down, they probably wish that they had another outfielder right there so they could put Acuna in center field and then put Duvall out there in one of the corners. So they do have some really solid role players on that team. Starling Marte gets on base, same with Jesus Aguilar. And then you get guys like Miguel Rojas gets on base. I mean, they don't have a ton of pop outside of Adam Duvall, but they have a lot of guys that can get on base. And, I think I kind of underrate that at my own expense here. But, the one thing that I said I wanted to see from this team was a young position player step up. We've seen a lot of these young pitchers step up. We haven't seen a young position player step up, but Jazz Chisholm is really fun to watch. I saw him today. He had another good game. I believe it was an extra base hit that drove in some runs. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's really fast, a great fielder there over at second, can also play short as he did today. But he adds another dimension to that lineup, a lot of speed. And then you look at the rotation. The rotation has honestly been, in my mind, one of the best in the NL East. I mean, Sandy Alcantara, I know he made the All-Star team. What was that? Was that in 2019? It was recently he made the All-Star game. I guess it was 2019 because they didn't have it last year. But he looks really good. I mean, he honestly is probably one of the most underappreciated starting pitchers in my mind. I mean, I think he's the kind of guy that is consistently going to put up numbers that are around the number two, maybe even number one in a lot of rotations. Trevor Rogers is another guy that looks really good for me. Big strikeout numbers and has a 1.8 ERA through his first two starts. So they look great. But I want to get another thought here on the team they played this week, and that's the Braves. They don't seem like themselves right now. So what do you think is the problem right now down in Atlanta?
Well, I mean, we kind of mentioned the one guy carrying this offense in Ronald Acuna, and he leads in every stat except for walks on this Braves team. Batting average, home runs, RBI, stolen bases, runs, on base percentage, slugging percentage. Should I keep going? I mean, the main problem is that this offense is lackluster behind him. I mean, Ronald Acuna, he's hitting 442 on the season. No one else is hitting above 300. I mean, guys like Freddie Freeman have struggled. Marcell Ozuna have struggled. They both hit under 200, and they were both MVP candidates last year. Freddie Freeman won the MVP, so the offense has been really lackluster so far. Ronald Acuna has 7 home runs. The next best player is 4 with Freddie Freeman, and Pablo Sandoval has 3. So there's a problem there when Pablo Sandoval is up there in your home run race, but the offense just has to pick things up. And last year it was the complete opposite. The offense was great to start the year, but Ronald Acuna was ice cold. So it's kind of the complete opposite in Atlanta right now. But Acuna is doing his best to really keep this Braves team afloat. I mean, right now they're still in second. They're still in second to last place. They're in fourth with a 5-8 record, so they're not really out of anything yet. But there just has to be some shining light there in the offense, whether that's Dansby Swanson or one of the guys you mentioned before, like or even like Travis d'Arnaud, someone like that. There just has to be someone that could provide some little light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the number 221. They're hitting 221 right now. And yes, they're getting the home runs. And in fact, I believe they have the most home runs right now in the league through 13 games. I mean, that the pop hasn't been the problem. They haven't been getting guys on base. They haven't been getting any of those, other hits. You still need guys to get on base to win ball games. And it's the same thing that's going on right now, quite honestly, with the Phillies. They're not hitting, they're not getting on base. So, that's kind of the problem. They almost look like the Reds did last year. In fact, I think that's kind of the perfect comp. They had the pop. The only way they win games is via the long ball and pitching. They can't situationally hit. In fact, yesterday, you look at the game that went into extras. You start with the runner on second base. There is no excuse to have a guy at second base with no outs and not be able to score him, especially in extra innings when you're down by 1 run and you need to get that run in, okay, to keep the game going. And they couldn't do it. So their situational hitting right now is awful. And I do think it's only a matter of time. I mean, again, you look at guys like Freddie Freeman. I know he's not hitting well right now outside of the couple home runs he's hit. There's a lot of guys that will heat up at some point, but they're going to need Marcell Ozuna and Ozzy Albies to come through. Marcell Ozuna, they just gave a big contract. And look, despite what you think about the play at the plate, that happened off the Marcell Ozuna throw. Marcell Ozuna has a noodle arm, okay? He's not a good outfielder at all in my mind anymore. He should probably be a DH. And despite that, the Braves gave him a big contract because of his offensive output. And I get that it's really early. I get that it's been like 12, 13 games. But For a guy to get, 4 years, 65 million and not really play all that great of an outfield, defense in left field, that's going to be a problem if he can't hit anymore. And he just has not found his stroke at all yet so far this year. And I'm not sure what they're going to do with him to find it. But, there's other guys too. I mean, Austin Riley, big prospect over at third base for them, not playing well at all. A lot of strikeouts there too. Everybody's striking out a lot, to be completely honest. I mean, if you look through the lineup, nobody's hitting all that well, like you said, outside of Acuna. So, I think Freddie Freeman, look, he's not going to hit 191 forever. He'll be fine. I do think Travis d'Arnaud will hit over 225. Dansby Swanson, had the game-winning hit. He'll hit over 204. He'll be fine. So I assume a lot of these guys will rebound, and that's how things will get back to normal there. But it's concerning. And then you look, at the pitching mound right now, and they just had Max Fried go down. So I mean, how do you think that impacts the rotation there?
That's huge, and especially for this Braves team that lacks a lot of depth already. The fact that they lost one of their young pitchers definitely hurts them. And we'll see what Mike Soroka's status is. He's probably going to come back in May, maybe June for the Braves. But overall, this is a really weird mix with this rotation. Like they have a young guy in Ian Anderson on that staff who hasn't been playing up to standards thus far. They also signed Charlie Morton in free agency, who is in his late 30s in his career. So there's not really too much depth with this Braves rotation so far this year. So hopefully Fried isn't out for long, and hopefully they get Soroka back as well. But it's just a massive blow to a team that already has offensive issues. Now there's issues in the pitching staff as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder. I mean, obviously he might be hurt, but something was up with Max Fried even before he was hurt in that he was really getting hit around a lot more than I've ever seen him get hit around. I didn't really notice any velo loss or anything like that, but I'm not really sure what was going on with him there. Again, I don't know if it was hamstring problems or if maybe he was tipping some of his pitches or his mechanics were off, but he probably needs this stint on the IL to kind of get himself together. But until then, the rotation has struggled. In fact, the best pitcher has been a young guy in, Huskar Inoa, and he has been really good, but doesn't have experience. I mean, Ian Anderson, I think, not to say teams have figured him out, but I think that he kind of needs to make some adjustments right now. He's been okay so far, but they've lost their two best pitchers. I mean, when you look at over the last couple of years, their best pitchers have been Mike Soroka and Max Fried, and now both are out. And I'm not sure when either will be back. I mean, Soroka's probably back, I don't know, June, I would assume. And Fried, I'm not really sure. There's not really a timeline there. So they're going to have one of these other guys step up. And I know Bryce Wilson and Kyle Wright have both been kind of their guys in the past that have had to step in, both big name prospects that haven't been able to get it done. So I'm assuming one of those guys will be called up. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that rotation. I mean, they definitely are thin right now, and they're not they aren't built to have two of their stars, out of the lineup for an extended period of time, especially when this team isn't hitting. But I do want to move on now to the rest of the NL East. You look at the Mets right now. What are your thoughts? Do you think Lindor is going to be okay? I mean, I know, look, the track record shows he's going to hit. The only reason I'm, mildly concerned, I guess, and I don't even think it's a mild concern, is that he had a bit of a down year last year. But overall, what are your thoughts on how the Mets have gone so far?
Well, overall, it's just a really small sample size. I mean, they've only played 8 games so far in the year, and they've won 5 of them, yeah, but they've had more postponements than wins so far earlier on this year. So there's definitely a couple of guys in this Mets lineup that have struggled. This entire Mets lineup has struggled to bat with runners in scoring position. That's been a big problem all start long to the season. I mean, they were kind of robbed of a win today against the Phillies. I mean, Jacob DeGrom against Zach Eflin. I don't know who you would pick, Chris, but I would probably go DeGrom just based off history. But overall, I am mildly concerned about Lindor. You mentioned the offseason last year, but there have been a couple Mets players that have struggled. I mean, Lindor is one of them, but you also have Pete Alonso, Michael Conforto have all struggled. And Lindor, he has had a couple just singles thus far, has only had maybe one extra base hit so far this season, hasn't hit a home run yet. And he hasn't really had that iconic moment yet, just kind of that welcome to New York moment. And he's going to be here for the next decade. So he is now. Well, I mean, the Mets don't have to worry about it. The Mets don't have to worry about a contract to sign him to, and it's going to be a war. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays. And I mean, whatever he does, if he just kind of stays where he was last year, kind of it would be really unfortunate for the Mets since they're kind of stuck with him at that point. But they did pay him like a top five player in baseball. So obviously they're expecting top five player in baseball performance. It's still really early in the season. Only been 8 games so far this season. So I don't really think you should worry too much, but there are definitely some concerns there just off of how he played last year, how he finished off last year.
Yeah, I think I know you said about how they paid him like a top 10 player in baseball, and even if he isn't one, I think this is just one of those things that now you kind of have to overpay to get your guy. I mean, you see it in Bryce Harper. Is Bryce Harper a top 10 player in the sport right now? No, but to get their guy, they had to pay him like a top 10 player, and I think that seems to be a common theme right now, unless you're Ronald Acuna, who the Braves somehow basically are stealing money for. I mean, I honestly, they're like, it is quite amazing how much of a heist that was for the Braves. I mean, it's terrible for the players union, that contract. But anyway, yeah, I think Lindor will be fine. I think this is just, a lot of times when you get players that have played their whole career in one city get moved, they may start off cold. So I'm not super worried about it. Overall, I think the Mets have a really deep lineup. I mean, through playing them here for the first couple times, I haven't noticed any real flaws on that team, to be quite honest. So, in my mind, right now, if I had to make any, I guess, alterations to my division picks, I probably pick them over the Braves. I mean, just because I think the Braves have some holes on that team that I was worried going in, but now that I've seen them exposed already this early in the season, I begin to think to myself that, well, okay, I mean, you look, I think the Mets have a more complete lineup, maybe not as much upside, but more complete. And I think they have a more stable rotation. So that's probably who I would pick right now if I were to go back and redo things. But, we'll see. Obviously, still really early. And then over to the Nationals right now. I currently have game day up right now as they're playing the Diamondbacks, and Patrick Corbin is a hot mess. I mean, he is awful through his first. I mean, granted, his first start was against LA, but he got lit up in the first inning for 3 runs against the Diamondbacks, and they're at it again, and it looks like they're going to score on him right now. He's walked 3 batters, hit a batter. I'm going to be honest. I mean, we both had concerns going into this year about this Nats rotation. And right now, what are your thoughts? I mean, I think not to toot our own horn here, but we look correct. I mean, Strasburg has looked hittable, Scherzer has looked hittable, and Patrick Corbin has the command of a T-ball pitcher. So I mean, look, I mean, I obviously it's too early to say, hey, we were right on this. But what are your thoughts on the Nats so far? Obviously, very early.
Well, I mean, overall, I had the Nationals in fifth place but before the season even happened. So, I mean, I'm very happy to see them start out 3-6 thus far. But thank God the Nationals got the World Series ring out of Patrick Corbin before his decline because he was awful last year as well. And the start this year has been great for him. I mean, he was kind of a decent pitcher. Not he was kind of an above average pitcher when he first signed the contract, and I thought it was an overpayment when he first signed. So I was very surprised when he actually did pitch really well that first year to win the World Series. But ever since then, that contract has looked like an albatross early on, and he's looking like it today so far against the Diamondbacks. But this Nationals team, they have a ton of holes, and that pitching rotation, it was really front loaded with guys like Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbin. We thought, and there's still no depth in that rotation as well. And then the lineup, it's really a boomer bust type of lineup. I mean, guys like Josh Bell, Kyle Schwarber, I said at the start of the season too, but they're guys who can hit 40 home runs in a season, but still hit 200 on the year, barely over 200 on the year. Like this offense, aside from Trey Turner and Juan Soto, really lacks, really just lacks in the hitting department, I think. And this Nationals team, have looked really shaky thus far. And I know the COVID situation kind of hurt them as well. And Patrick Corbin was on that list, so maybe it's just kind of readjusting to the game. But overall, just a bad start once again for Washington.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I know Washington fans will talk about, oh, look how we started during the World Series year. I mean, and yeah, sure. I mean, maybe that happens, but I mean, I don't know. This team, the offense has actually been better than I expected so far. Um, with a lot of guys stepping up. I mean, Trey Turner hasn't been that great so far, but Josh Bell, Josh Harrison, I don't think he can continue at this pace, but has looked really good. The problem for this team, though, again, is one, how these secondary pieces outside of Soto continue to play this year. They're going to have Harrison and Bell and Starlin Castro to continue to hit well, and I don't think they will. And two, yeah, like you were saying, I mean, the pitching staff hasn't looked good. Now, Corbin's velocity actually seems to be a little bit back up this year, but he's still very hittable, which is concerning. I mean, if even his velocity is up and he's getting hit around like this, then something's up with him, that they're going to have to figure out. So, and the problem with that team is they're built so that they don't have any high minors depth, that if somebody goes on the IL, that they can call somebody up. If, let's say, Corbin requires some time on the IL or something like that, then they're going to be going with like Austin Voth, or probably a bullpen day, to be completely honest. I know they have John Lester still kind of working his way back. It'll be interesting to see how they use John Lester when he gets back. But that rotation is just not very good outside of, surprisingly, Joe Ross, who apparently is like unhittable right now. But outside of him, yeah, they don't look good at all. So definitely, overall, it's been a weird start to the division here. But I want to hear so far, I guess, expanding outside the NL East, who has been the, I guess, most surprising team on the bad end of things?
I think overall, a team that I can look at just this past week is the Houston Astros. I mean, they started out the season really hot. They were 6-1 to start out the year, but ever since then, they have been on a 5-game losing streak these past couple of games, excuse me, and they weren't really even against good teams as well. I mean, two of those losses they were against the Oakland A's, who they were the worst team in baseball during the first week of the season, and then the last 3 games they were against their former manager AJ Hinch and the Detroit Tigers, where they got swept in 3 games, and none of the games were even close. I mean, the closest they got was a 2-run game, and that one took place just today. But overall, this Astros team has just not looked really good thus far, and they came into that losing streak as the first place team in the division. And looking at this AL West, it looked like it was going to be Astros division to win, as they are still 1.5 games back on the division leading Seattle Mariners, which is not something I thought I would say. And the run differential kind of tells a different story. But the Astros, they have a plus 11 run differential, and they're the only team in the division to have a positive run differential, which just kind of shows that the Astros, they shouldn't be where they are right now, but here they are.
Yeah, I do agree that they've been kind of a bad surprise, but I got to go with the Chicago Cubs. I mean, look, I have to say, so far you've been right on the Cubs. I mean, I thought that some of these guys that haven't been hitting would really pull it together, and they have been somehow even worse. I mean, this offense is dreadful. I mean, they are one of the worst offenses I have watched in a long time. I mean, they're hitting right now under 100, or not under 100, under one. 170. Okay, yeah, they're hitting 163. So last in the league right there, and it's not even close. They're the next team above them, 198 for the Cleveland Indians, and then you go 204 for the Milwaukee Brewers. They are dreadful, and they don't have the pitching of the Milwaukee Brewers or Cleveland Indians to hit that poorly. I mean, in my mind, if they continue to hit like this, even under 200, they're going to be selling like before the deadline, like well before the deadline. I I don't know how it all fell apart so fast in the Windy City. I mean, it's quite astonishing that you have guys that have seen their career just take a complete nosedive, like with what we've seen so far with like Anthony Rizzo. I mean, Rizzo wants Goldschmidt money, but the dude hasn't been anything more than a replacement level player going back now to his last almost actually it is 70 games if you count last season too. Over his last 70 games, he's hitting like 210-ish with 12 homers. I mean, that's not going to get it done. I'm sorry, but you're not getting anywhere close to Goldschmidt money for that kind of, stats. And it's not like the guy was a scrub before that. I mean, he was hitting like 280 with, 25 to 32 homers every year. So I don't know where it all went wrong for him. And he's not the only culprit here. I know I singled him out, but the the rest of that team has been underperforming as well. I mean, Javi Baez has been a shell of his former self, hitting right at the Mendoza line at 200. Wilson Contreras has slowly picked it up. He's still only hitting 226. Jock Peterson looks horrible. I mean, maybe he got, you leave LA and I guess, it's the LA effect and you're just not good anymore. I don't know. He's hitting 108 through his first 12 games. So, I
108, but
mean,
he got his waffle maker. He got his waffle maker after that one home run.
oh, I didn't hear. Okay, good for him. I'm glad he got that. He's got as many waffle makers as home runs now, so I guess he's got that going for him. I mean, he's just not good. I mean, I don't know how that team has gotten that bad. I mean, I look. I guess they need to be out there taking like extended batting practice every day because it is. I'm going to be honest. For professional baseball hitters to go up there and hit as poorly as they're hitting, it's almost astonishing. I mean, like you have to go up there trying to hit that bad to hit that poorly. So I don't know the way they fix it, quite honestly. And I mean, the way Milwaukee's pitching, and the way I think, St. Louis will play, I don't even think it'll be close if they don't pick it up soon.
Yeah, I mean, like the main reason why I had the Cubs as low as I did when we talked about them, when we did our division predictions, is just because I thought a lot of those guys would get traded off by the deadline. I didn't think they'd all be this bad to start out the year. I mean, it's been a lackluster offense, and it kind of looked that way ever since the management change when Joe Madden left, and ever since then there was a flip that switched off with Javier Baez, and he went from MVP candidate to a shell of his former self, like you said. And I don't know how that's possible. I mean, with Anthony Rizzo, you could say he's getting up there in age, but Javier Baez was heading into his prime, and he's heading into a free agency where if he had a solid season, he was set to make big time money with some of the shortstops that are out there in free agency. And now it's just looking really bad. And I mean, Chris Bryant went from MVP back in like 2015 to no one's really even heard of him ever since that MVP season. I don't know how it happened. I don't know what went wrong for Chicago after they won the World Series, but especially with an NL Central where you could see 4 out of those 5 teams winning at least 85 games this year, it's definitely possible that the Cubs are kind of left out here, especially with the way that the Reds, the Brewers, and Cardinals have looked.
It's really sad is Chris Bryant hitting 243 with 3 home runs actually leads the team right now in offense. I mean, and he's still striking out a quarter of the time too. I mean, it's not like he's, some world beater out there that's impossible to get out. So yeah, I mean, things are really bad there in Chicago. And I look, they're not going to get any help from guys on the farm, I don't think. I mean, this is going to have to be an internal turnaround. And obviously, it's very early, so it can still happen. But my plan of a lot of their stars bouncing back so far has not gone to plan. But going to my most surprising team right now. Well, actually, I don't want to pick them as my most surprising team, but I do want to talk about them as the most surprising, I guess, position group, the Milwaukee Brewers pitching staff. I mean, can we just talk about Corbin Burns for a second? I mean, he looks like he's going to win the Cy Young right now, quite honestly. I mean, he's pitching right now to the tune of a .49 ERA through 3 starts with a 14.7 K per nine to a 0 walk per nine. I mean, the dude is lights out. And obviously last year he had a 2.11 ERA. I mean, is it true? I mean, this guy could honestly be the next, like, I don't want to say he's the next, like, Max Scherzer or anything, but this guy could be really legit. I mean, he was the 35th ranked prospect overall according to Fangraphs back in 2018. I mean, this guy could be a legit bona fide ace there. And Milwaukee, that really is going to help them, I think, possibly now compete for this division.
Yeah, I agree, and the, main thing that's kind of held the Brewers back, during, like, the prime of Christian Yelich is the pitching staff, and it's something that they never really found a way to address, um, really ever. Like, they've never gone out and spent on a big money pitcher. They had a chance at Yu Darvish, let him walk. They've had chances at guys that could make the rotation a little bit better, but they never really decided to do that, and it was kind of the reason why the window of their ability to compete kind of shut down that quickly. And I think a team that I want to look at here for just surprising, just the Boston Red Sox. I mean, we've talked about it with Brandon Conroy when he was a guest on the show. He was high on the Red Sox. None of us, no one else really was. And then they won 9 straight games after getting swept by the Orioles. I don't know how that happened. It is a random 5 game winning streak that I don't think it's a random 9 game winning streak that I don't think I've ever seen, but it happened. And I mean, just looking at their offense, it's been the main reason why it's happened here. I mean, JD Martinez hit 3 home runs in a game. He leads the team in home runs with 5, tied with Rafael Devers. They also have Alex Verdugo's kind of found a way to pick things up. Xander Bogaerts and Christian Vasquez have all had great performances during the winning streak. And they've beaten some quality teams as well. I mean, they got revenge on the Orioles, not really a quality team, but they also beat the defending AL champion Tampa Bay Rays, and they beat the Minnesota Twins twice. I mean, they're the ones that ended that winning streak, but that Red Sox team, they currently lead in the AL East thus far, and it's been on the back of their offense thus far. They've had a lot of high scoring performances so far during that winning streak, including a 14-run game against Baltimore. But we'll see how they manage to pick things up, especially as they welcome teams like the White Sox and the Mets in the upcoming series they play.
Yeah, the Red Sox were never a question of that lineup being bad. I mean, I know that they don't have Mookie Betts anymore, and I think a lot of people just kind of assume, oh, okay, they don't have basically that entire outfield, with Betts and Benintendi and all of them, but they still can hit this lineup. I mean, and I kind of said that going into the season. Verdugo was a very highly regarded prospect with the Dodgers, and he's good. I mean, can he replace Mookie Betts? No, but he doesn't need to. JD Martinez, obviously, he had a down year last year. He's very good offensively. I mean, that's why he's a DH. The dude rakes. And Rafael Devers, his defense at third can, be hit or miss, but overall, he's got a great bat, a lot of power. So, and of course, Xander Bogaerts, they gave him the big contract, and he's a great shortstop. So that was never the question. The question was always the pitching with that team. Really, all they need is league average pitching. I mean, if the lineup is going to hit at least somewhat close to what they have, maybe not this much, but somewhat close to what they have. All they need is their pitching to be competent. And so far, Nate Eovaldi, I don't know how much he'll be able to sustain it, but he's been very good. Nick Pivetta hasn't imploded, on himself yet, but give that some time, as any Philly fan knows, he'll probably self-destruct. But Eduardo Rodriguez is decent. So as long as they keep going, they could make a run. I don't know that they'll win the division, but the lineup is good enough to compete. So, but I still think my biggest surprise has got to be the Angels. I know this is a team that, look, I mean, not to call you out, Logan, but you said, and I quote, "When will you guys learn?" Well, I don't know. Is it, Angels in the outfield part two out here in Anaheim? But they're making a run, this team. I like this Angels team a lot. Okay. Shohei Ohtani, listen, I don't know, again, if he's another guy that'll be able to keep this up, but I think a lot of people wrote him off when he got hurt and said, oh, okay, this guy was a one hit wonder. He can't pitch anymore. He can't hit anymore. He's done. It was fun while it lasted. Well, guess what? He looks back and better than ever. He's hitting 340 right now with 4 homers. I think people forgot. I mean, this guy was a 285 hitter with around 20 home runs in his first 2 seasons. Okay. And he didn't even play all the time. So he's a very good player. I think people kind of didn't remember that. Now, his question is going to be whether he can sustain himself on the mound. But the team looks really good. I mean, and they haven't even gotten their best player going in David Fletcher. Yeah, I said it. David Fletcher, the GOAT. I had to admit it. I'm sorry. But, I do think that David Fletcher's on base skills, if once he starts getting on base combined with, I know he's hurt right now, but the pop of Rendon, Otani, and Trout is going to be really good. And then, by the way, Jared Walsh has all of a sudden kind of broken out in his, at 27, he's hitting 324 right now. So, which did not expect that at all. Although I guess he had a pretty good run last season, over a couple games, or actually, I guess that was over 32 games. So Jared Walsh breaking out adds another depth piece to that lineup. So now it's not just Trout anymore or Otani. Now you got to go through Fletcher, Otani, Trout, Walsh, and then once he comes back, Rendon. That's a pretty formidable five. I mean, of course, the bottom of it going through, John Jay, Jose Rojas, sure, they're not great. Kurt Suzuki's not great either, although he hit pretty well with Washington, and he'll hit okay, I think, with LA. But they're not a bad team. I mean, Dylan Bundy's good. They need more pitching still, but I really don't think they're as awful as a lot of people thought.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those people. I mean, you can call me out in any way possible. I mean, we know that this is a solid lineup, and you mentioned a lot of the guys there. Not going to really touch on it too much, but when they're healthy, this Angels lineup can rival most teams in the MLB, and they're kind of bullying the weak and confused AL West. I mean, the Astros are on a big losing streak right now. The A's have kind of looked lost all season long. They did just lose 2 out of 3 to the Royals, though. That is definitely a concerning sign. But they still really haven't learned what the pitching thing is. I mean, Dylan Bundy is their best pitcher thus far. Currently is a 3 ERA. But other than that, not really too much to get excited about for the Angels in terms of pitching staff. I mean, Andrew Heaney got a 7 ERA. Alex Cobb, I believe, has around a 4 ERA as well for this team. They do need pitching. They've needed pitching for a majority of Mike Trout's prime. They have never managed to figure that out. And right now they're currently winning due to reliable offense, but they're going to have to get one more pitcher at the deadline, maybe two, if they want to make a strong run at this division here. I think right now, with the way things are playing out, they definitely could make a run for second place. I think that the Astros, they'll figure things out. I'm not quite sure about the A's doing that just yet, but the Angels, they're still a couple pitching pieces away from really competing. Their offense, one of the best in the league. They've looked like it all season, especially with Otani playing the way he is right now. But they have to figure it out in the pitching staff, and that has not changed.
Yeah, I don't think that's changed. I think the big question will be kind of going back to the Astros, how good they are. Because if the Astros are going to, kind of do what they've done recently, and or at least this year, go on a couple game winning streak and then fall off and allow the Angels to stay in it till the deadline, I think the Angels will go all in at the deadline and look to acquire starting pitching, because nobody else in that division is that good. I mean, the Rangers aren't good. I know the Mariners have started 8-5, but three of those eight have come against the Orioles, so I don't think they're that good. So, it's really going to come down to Angels and Astros, I think. I mean, maybe the Athletics. I'm not really sure what to think of them there, but yeah. By the way, quick update on Patrick Corbin. Um, he has now given up 10 runs, um, 4 walks, 2 hit batters, and 3 home
10 runs.
runs. 10 runs.
Wow.
So, I'm going to be honest. When you hit 2 batters and walk 4 over 2 innings, I kind of wonder if he may be hurt. Um, yeah. I mean, I'm going to be quite honest. If they lose him, if he's really this bad, and he's going to pitch to like a 5 ERA, he pitched to a 4.66 last year. If he's really this bad and or hurt, then yeah, the Nats may be in deep trouble here. So we'll have to see.
So I'm looking at his ERA right now. I'm not sure if you gotten a chance to look at it yet. You want to take a guess what it is if you haven't?
Oh, I'm looking at it right now. It's a 21.32. I've seen some tweets, and actually, this is a good thing to end on. I just saw a tweet that was, if you're given 1,000 at bats against a below average major league pitcher, do you think you could get a hit, or at least, okay, I think it said home run, but I'll even shorten it to a hit. Because I saw somebody respond to, I'm pretty sure I can take Patrick Corbin deep right now. And then somebody else said, I'm pretty sure Patrick Corbin would take Patrick Corbin deep right now, which is in all honesty completely fair. But what do you think? Do you think you could get a hit off of a below average MLB pitcher?
So I won't even say below average MLB pitcher. I'll just say Jerry Familia. I'll just go with that logic. But I feel like if you have 1,000 pitches, I know I am not a great hitter at all. I know I am not a great baseball player. But if you have 1,000 at bats, I mean, there is a good chance I'll be able to pick up what his pitch speed is, and there will be a good chance I'll just kind of just swing whenever, just kind of pick up that speed, pick up that pattern, and I feel like I'll find a way to get at least one ground ball through the hole. I mean, as soft as it might be, I mean, if I'm fighting for my life here, I will probably just sprint out as hard as I could. Maybe I'll lay down a bunt a couple times, try and beat one of those things out. But I think overall, especially with Jerry Familia's blown saves habits when he used to close games. I think I might be able to get one.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I don't know who I would face. Definitely wouldn't want to face any high velocity. I'd actually probably rather face, although he's not below average. I'd almost rather face like a Zach Greinke, because I don't want to face any kind of high velocity, because I mean, granted, he's still throwing like in the 80s, so I still wouldn't be able to.
Got the ethos though.
Yeah, I feel confident I could get a base hit off the eephus pitch. I mean, I would almost have to know it's coming, and even that, like, it'd be, look, it's easy to say you can catch up to a 70-mile-an-hour pitch, but then it's another thing to actually do it. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to catch up to any high velocity. Look, I was more known for my pitching and fielding skills back in my house baseball days, but I wasn't the fastest, but I could lay down a pretty mean bunt. So I'm going to say I could bunt for a base hit. I would say that I could, if I were given 1,000 at bats, get a hit against a major league pitcher. Could I hit a homer? No, unless I go to my local park. Actually, we had a stadium that I would go take. We'd play a home run derby, and it was like 200 down the corners, and it was like the softball field basically, out at for Penn State. If you gave me the softball field dimensions that were 200 down the corners and 220 to center, and you gave me 1,000 at bats against a below average pitcher, maybe I luck into sneaking one over. Maybe.
I mean, for me, I'd be lucky to get like one in the outfield, especially even if it was like a 50-mile-an-hour pitch. Like I was never known for my hitting abilities. I was probably known, if anything, for my defense or just my ability to be like the Brandon Nimmo type and work out a walk whenever I
Hmm.
could. But that's like the baseball player I was. I was never I was never a power guy. I was never a guy like that. So it would be a stretch for me to say home run. I'd be lucky to say hit, maybe lay down a bunt, but overall, I think I would win.
Listen, I mean, as soon Billy Bean probably is going to listen to this pod right now and heard your on base stats and is going to give you a call immediately. So
All
all I
lines
hear
are
is
open.
all I hear is gets on base. I mean, I did love to draw a good walk, but look, if it was like 50 miles an hour, like a BP pitch, like 50 miles an hour, like I knew it was coming, like just down the middle, I feel confident I might be able to take one out of the softball field here, like 200, 220 down the lines, maybe the left center power alley at like 210. I feel confident that if it was a batting practice, 50 mile an hour, get me over pitch, I could hit it. Now, if you're talking like an MLB player throwing, 90s, 80s, then no, I'm still probably bunting for a base hit. But that's all the time we have on this edition of the Top Prospects podcast. For Logan Bourandas, I'm Chris Lemmo, and have a good night.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.